Good morning. Today is Sunday, March 28th. Um, let's start by setting our intentions using the four measurables. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. I forgot to make a video yesterday. Usually I make a video on Instagram for the day before the class, and I didn't. So some people may not have gotten the message. But so let's meditate. Let's start with meditation, which is very important. We've been doing this like almost 7 months, or maybe 7 months now. So that's a good chunk of time. A good regular chunk of time, being consistent. And those of you who are adding this to an almost daily practice, or adding an almost daily practice to this, I think that's really the only way, you can make progress. A couple of weeks ago, we read something from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. He was talking about how meditation really is the only way to, to kind of traverse this path. Obviously, the teachings are essential, but they can't really be integrated without meditation. And, remember, meditation is something that is not just for the cushion, right? It's dropping into that, letting go of the thoughts, interrupting the flow of thoughts that we've cultivated, that flow that's become part and parcel of who we are and how we relate to ourselves and relate to the world. It's interrupting that, seeing what's underneath, and in that little moment, almost dismantling the concept of self that we've built, our whole lives, really. So we can have that gap in which we can relate in a different way, in a way that's, as the Buddhists would say, more in tune with the nature of reality, which is reality being non-dual, and our perception as self and others is just really a very subjective perception that we've developed over, as the Buddhists say, countless eons and countless lifetimes. With that, these are very big, they're big concepts, but it's little steps like this, like what we're doing today, that is the only way really that you can begin to make progress on a spiritual path, on this spiritual path. There are many spiritual paths. I'm only speaking to this one, and this is what it's about, really. Many people may never question themselves or how they relate to the world. And when they encounter suffering and difficulty, they, try to fix it in that same subjective way. Well, what is it that's bothering me? Maybe I'll just leave this person, and sometimes that's necessary, but at the same time, often it's an inside job. It's how we're looking at the world rather than how the world is, what the world is sending our way. And meditation, I think, the more it becomes a habit, the more the spiritual qualities can be accessed, and the more you can act and relate to others in the world through those spiritual qualities. What do we mean by spiritual qualities? Patience, kindness, equanimity, love, generosity, those things, really. And when you meet someone who's really cultivated those, like a great lama or a great altruist, or someone who's just dedicated their lives to the benefit of others, I'm not even talking about necessarily religious teachers or, that presence is always, their presence is always imbued with those things, kindness and generosity and patience. And this practice is what, the path towards cultivating those. Like we've said before, in essence, the Buddha really taught three things. One, do no harm. Right? Two, do good, cultivate virtue, cultivate these qualities. And three, tame the mind. Okay, with that in mind, let's meditate. Here's the posture. We sit where we have legs crossed or legs one on top of the other. I like a cushion. Hips above the knees helps. You may find it perfectly fine to be flat on the floor with no cushion. You can be in a chair as long as your feet are flat and your back is straight. You don't want to be like reclined, So back is straight but not rigid, not shoulders aren't back at attention but just relaxed. Hands can be here, they can be here. I like this. Palm in the back of the hand and then curved and resting in the lap. Some people like the ring finger and the thumb, or this. It's about being comfortable. Comfortable but attentive. Right. So the neck should be straight, but the head slightly tilted. And again, not rigid, you're not flexed, you're not, at attention, you're comfortable. Chin slightly down, right? Usually the lips are closed, but the teeth are a little bit apart. And the tongue would go right behind the upper teeth where they meet the roof of the mouth. We're going to breathe through our nose unless you're stuffed up or whatever. Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which is what I'm, practiced in, eyes are open, but not fixed intently on something, nor unfocused and spaced out, but resting lightly on whatever you choose to. It should be something that you don't have to like strain your eyes, that's right in front of you. You have something like a Buddha or a view out the window or anything. The breath is our anchor. The breath is what we're going to always go back to kind of reset us as we work with the thoughts, because thoughts are going to happen. The mind thinks, that's what it does. And really the practice is working with the thoughts. So we're in the posture, we're relaxed, we're breathing through the nose, we're kind of focusing our attention on this spot between the nose and the upper lip. And we're just trying to become aware of what's going on in our mind. And start with focusing on the breath. Let that be your awareness. But you're going to notice very quickly that your mind is going to start thinking. So you're not just going to be focused on the breath. You're going to think about what you're going to do in 45 minutes or whenever this class is finished, or what you're going to do later, or what happened yesterday, or somebody pissed you off yesterday, or you're worried about tomorrow's, work day, or whatever it is. And that's okay to have the thought. We're not judging the fact that we're thinking. We're not looking at the thought like we're not meditating. It's all meditating. From the time you sit down, you're meditating. Thought comes in, you notice it. Just mind looking at mind. Notice the thought. The key, the whole crux of this whole thing is to become aware that you're thinking. And if you can do that, then you can go back to the breath. If you can't do that, you're just going to stay thinking and be kind of following this train of thought and be lost in the thought. So the practice is, what we're doing is recognizing that and going back to the breath. We use the image, we can use the image, and you don't have to really, of a thought being like a cloud that arises in this very clear, pristine, unstained, limitlessly potential of whatever sky, right? And the thought arises out of the sky, but it dissolves back into the sky. That's how a thought is. It's impermanent, and the sky is just total calm and clear. And that's what we experience when the thought dissolves. And then another thought will come, and we do the same technique. And that's the work. That's what we're doing. The big preconception very often with people is meditation is about not thinking. And it really discourages a lot of people. Discouraged me for a long time, because I would try to meditate and all I did was think, when I was like actually sitting and like thinking. But that's what we do. And the practice is to work with the thoughts. So with all that in mind, let us meditate for 9 minutes. If you have any questions, use the Q&A function, but don't do it during these 9 minutes. Let's just meditate during these 9 minutes. You can do the question, because I'm going to read a little bit after this, and during the reading, you can, put your questions in, but try to use this 9 minutes to meditate. Okay. I may talk a little bit during the meditation, but keep focus on your practice while I talk if you can. Okay. If you have to shift or itch or something like that, it's totally fine. You don't have to be like rigidly locked into this position. And if your body's getting really tense and uncomfortable, just shift and loosen it. That's all okay. You find yourself thinking, just become aware of it, leave it where it is, and go back to the breath. No big deal. And just relax. Settle into the relaxation of it. It's not meant to be tense and laborious, you know. It's not easy though. I don't say it is, nor do I think it is. Find yourself thinking, go back to the breath, where your attention on that space between the nose and mouth. Feel the air go in and out. Imagine that cloud just dissipating into that crystal clear, limitless blue sky. It's almost like you're merging your mind with that calm clarity of that sky. Back to the breath. That almost becomes our mantra. Back to the breath. Thoughts arise. Back to the breath. settle into that natural great peace. Settle your body and mind into that. Merge it into that. Whatever that image represents of the sky, that natural great peace that is the nature of mind. Right? I'm going to read. I've been reading a lot from Instagram sites because I've been in the process of moving and unpacking, and my stuff isn't all organized yet. So there's really great stuff on Instagram, Buddhist sites. Let's, here we go. Okay. This is from that site that I love. I've said it before, Padma Mala, Padmalla. This is from the great teacher, Chagdud Tulku Rinpoche. If you look closely at samsara, you will find there is no lasting happiness anywhere. Nothing to base your hope on. There aren't any samsaric circumstances you could create, no matter how great the virtue that would produce lasting happiness. People often squirm when they hear this. It makes them very uncomfortable, but we need to think about it until we realize that the spiritual path, difficult as it may be, is our only alternative. If we travel the spiritual path diligently, if our practice is pure and strong, we can purify karma. We need to contemplate the 4 thoughts to inspire diligence, to ensure that we're not just making futile gestures or practicing a false kind of spirituality. So the 4 thoughts, something called the 4 thoughts that turn the mind towards Dharma, which a lot of practitioners recite every day. One is that, the fact that you're in a human form and that you have received Dharma teachings is a very miraculous, almost, and favorable circumstance. Because you could have been born into a body or life form, animal that can't understand or hear the Dharma, or you could have been born in a country or a time where the Dharma wasn't being taught, but you are fortunate enough to hear and practice the Dharma, so you so choose, which is a very big deal and a very fortunate circumstance to remember. So the teachers always say we should not waste this opportunity. It's very precious. The second is that everything's impermanent, right? We are impermanent. The world is impermanent. The Earth one day will be destroyed, like they say. The sun will explode or whatever, and the universe will be. Everything's impermanent. 3 is that karma is infallible, the law of cause and effect, that we have to know that actions have a reaction, and that our actions don't just happen in a void, and 4, and that samsara suffering is inevitable. Those are the 4 thoughts that turn the mind towards the Dharma. So when you know these things and really realize them, it will inspire you to take up, the teachings and practice them, put them into effect. Let's see the next one. This is from Tenzin Palmo, who is a British woman who became a Tibetan Buddhist nun, who has vowed to attain enlightenment in whatever lifetime, be it this one or the next one or the one after that or after that, in the female form. This is from Lama Surya Das, his Instagram, and it's LamaSuryadaUsa, Lama Surya Das USA. And Tenzin Palmo says, I think it's very important for people to recognize that just as we ourselves wish for a sense of well-being and happiness and don't want to be made miserable, so does everybody we meet. Just as we ourselves wish for a sense of well-being and happiness and don't want to be miserable, we all wish that, right? We all want to be happy. We all want a sense of well-being. None of us want to be miserable. So does everybody we meet. We're actually very connected, including animals, in our wish for inner well-being and not to be hurt. Even an insect doesn't want to be hurt, you know. Animals are the same as us, is that they want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. What if people just thought about that, you know, just sitting in a theater or on a subway? What if we were conscious that all the people around us, whatever they may look like, in their heart of hearts, really just want to feel okay? What if your first thought for everybody you meet is not judgment, but may you be well and happy? If we could manage that much, it would change the world, wouldn't it? That's a big teaching. It's a really big, very profound teaching, very simple one, but I think very important. It's really the essence of the teachings in many ways, you know, that everyone is the same in a way, wants the same things. Okay, let's see if we can answer any questions. What was your first meditative experience? I guess it was at Jewel Heart in New York City. It was the first place I ever went to, which is still there. The teacher Garchen Rinpoche, who was a wonderful teacher and a wonderful guy. It was his center. It's now run by Demo Rinpoche. There's one in New York, in Tribeca, and there is one in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And that was my first place where I meditated. One of my issues with religion has been how much violence, wars it caused. I can't find any major conflicts initiated by Buddhism. When you're talking about religion initiating conflicts, you're often talking about a certain power structure. And there's, you know, there are countries in the world where the religious, you know, the kind of dominating religion of the country is in power of the government, power of the military sometimes. Those are very different things often than the actual religion, you know, because when it gets into the idea of power and government, then you're really dealing with the benefit of the country, and the country, you know, either you know, having to make decisions for the benefit of the country rather than actual just practicing a spiritual path, right? So there was some instances, and I'm not sure which country it was. I think it was in Southeast Asia. I have an idea of what it was, but I don't want to say because I'm not 100% sure. And the ruling, the majority of they were Buddhists, and there were conflict with the Muslims, and there's been vice versa and all that stuff. But I don't know. My opinion on this is any, you know, religion that says we're going to be killing people, you're not practicing the religion at that point. You're practicing something else. You know, we spoke last week, someone was talking about leaders in Buddhism, and Buddhism is very different than like a lot of other organized, in my point of view, like compared to like Catholicism, you have the Pope and the Vatican, and they make these decisions and edicts, and then everyone else has to follow them. Buddhism is very different, you know. There are some Buddhist lamas who are, you know, hermits who lives in caves, and they may have one or two students, and they're not in touch with any, you know, organizing body, governing body. They are teaching what they were taught by their lamas, you know. I mean, what I like about Buddhism is it's really less like an organized religion to me than it is a science of the mind, in a way, and a science about reality, you know. And the individual teachers, at least in Tibetan Buddhism, I don't know much about other uh, types of Buddhism. The teachers really are connected more to their lineage than they are in the whole overarching structure of Tibetan Buddhism, you know, as a whole. There's four major, you know, schools of Tibetan Buddhism that evolved at different points in different parts of Tibet, and within each one, so there are smaller. Like in my teacher follows Drikung Kagyu lineage. Kagyu is one of the four main branches. Drikung Kagyu is one of the sub lineages of Kagyu. So my teacher really is teaching what he learned from his teacher, not so much about, okay, the Dalai Lama said, now this is what we're going to teach. It's much more about this oral lineage that's been handed down, teacher to student, since the time of the Buddha. So when it gets into any kind of government or politics or something, to me, it's that's government and politics. It's not Buddhism, my opinion. Michael, I recently rewatched the session with Dr. Vesna Wallace and found it really beneficial. I was particularly interested in her response to the question about whether Buddhists are considered to be atheists. Yeah, that is an interesting question. Do you have plans to invite any other Buddhist scholars to these sessions? I do. I want to have Dr. Wallace back. And there's another Buddhist Lama who has agreed to come on, and I've just been in transit. So now that I'm settled, hopefully we will get the, you know. There's a really good teacher, Tsoknyi Rinpoche, Tsoknyi, Tsoknyi Rinpoche. And he made a really interesting distinction. He said, you know, as Buddhists, we believe in the nature of God, but not the concept of God. So concept of God meaning this omniscient being who's created everything, who kind of, you know, has omniscient power over the universe and things like that. Like Buddhists don't believe in the concept of that kind of individual or that kind of being, but the nature of God, which ultimately is Buddha nature, right? And that nature being that state of non-duality and complete interconnectedness and interdependence. Those spiritual qualities of love and kindness and generosity, that all goes under that thing of nature of God, though we don't call it a God as a conceptual thing. I found that to be a really clear distinction. And it's not saying we're atheists either, per se. Because she said when we asked Dr. Wallace that question, or Buddhist atheist, she said it was a very good question, and there's a lot of subtleties to it. It's not just a black and white yes and no thing. Any advice for creative people trying to maintain a spark of inspiration in today's world? Listen, I think before we're creative people, we have to be people first. We have to be, you know, I really find my spiritual practice, meditation or following teachings or anything, is really separate from anything creative. You know, I don't look at it like anything I do as a Buddhist to be like for the benefit of being creative or for my work or anything. It is, you know, it's spiritual path, you know. So I'd say put the creativity second, you know, and put the people part first. Struggling with multiple thoughts intruding at the same time. I get overwhelmed. How do you sort through the noise when it comes in layers? This kind of thing is just, that's how the mind works, you know, intruding thoughts at the same time. Yeah, two thoughts at once. And you know, this is how we've lived our whole lives in a Buddhist perspective, for many lives. Meditation is hard. It's really hard. And what's hard is it's really easy to look. Sometimes I count down those minutes and can't wait for it to be over because it's hard. It's similar to like when you're working out. You're like, oh, I only have 5 more minutes on the stairmaster or whatever, 2 more minutes, and and but what do we think about? What are we going back to? We're going back to our normal way of thinking, which is just being kind of lost in this avalanche and train of thoughts. So we have to train ourselves in meditation practice to become aware of the fact that we're thinking and familiarize with the practice of leaving the thought where it is and creating those gaps between the thoughts. And it's going to take a lot of practice and time. How do you sort through the noise when it comes in layers, or the noise that's in one layer rather than 2 layers is meditation practice, really. I would say maybe you have to be a little bit more diligent about technique. Maybe setting a more conducive environment can help. A more inspiring environment, maybe not. Maybe it's just going to be, the diligence in the practice. When you meditate, how would you describe your sense of vision? I try to keep my eyes nearly closed and can really only make out the form of my feet and mat. Maybe your line of vision is too low if you're just seeing your feet and the mat. I mean, it really should be kind of your gaze should be kind of like eye level, like parallel to the ground rather than towards the ground. Think about what happens with sense of vision, right? So if you see something, what happens is, like, I'm looking at my computer, right? And I think it's an Apple computer. Well, there's the thought. So the vision that's made, that event of a vision is next followed by a thought about the vision. Is my computer, it's an Apple computer, it's 1 year old, blah, blah, blah. So it's the same technique as meditation, because what we're dealing with now is a thought, not, it's not just a vision. Our mind is trained to have a thought about the vision, right? So the sensorial, sensory input is the image, but then the mind immediately interprets that and reacts to that and elaborates on that with a thought. So we're back to meditation using the technique. But if you're looking at your feet and the mat, I think maybe your gaze is too low. And what can happen when your gaze is too low, you can get into a bit of a sleepy feeling. So see if it changes a little bit. If don't put your head up. Your chin should be down, but like the gaze is a little bit more in level with where your eyes are, maybe slightly lower. What have changed in you in your intimate circle since you started meditating? You'd have to ask my intimate circle, because I have my own ideas, but they may be delusion. But you need to experiment with that. It doesn't really matter what happens with me, because if you meditate, you can, and try to make the effort to incorporate some of these teachings into your daily life and meditation into your daily life. Let us know how your intimate circle reacts. What is the best way to stick with a regular meditation practice? That's more of a yes and no question. Yes, stick with a regular meditation practice. Once again, create a inspiring, a place. If it can just be a corner of the room, or if it's, it's only you only set it up when you meditate because you're limited on space. Put something there that inspires you. If you're into Buddhism, it's an image of a Buddha, or one of the teachers, or a Lama, or a piece of artwork, or a view. Maybe you want to light incense. Use a certain cushion, or put a certain blanket over your lap or something. Make it ceremonial. And we talked before about taking the seat with dignity. That you're really you're taking the seat we dedicate at the end of the class of the benefit of all beings. This is a very noble pursuit. So often, creating that environment. So knowing the other thing that's always really good for me, the best, what's really good for me is to make schedules. I started getting really productive, a way back when I started really diligently keeping a date book, and a physical one, not a digital one, which you can do whatever you want, obviously, but really, you know, making things very specific. Okay, Monday at 9, I'm doing this, and then I'm going to meet so and so and do this, and when you have routines and schedules, you tend to be more diligent about it. It's easier to do it. You get used to it. Your mind starts to get used to it. If you're going to meditate at a certain time in a certain place, your mind and body know that that time is set aside for that, and that place is dedicated to that. Those things all help, I find. Why keep eyes open when meditating? Because this is practice for living. And most of the time when we're living, our eyes are open. We don't walk, we don't walk through the park with our eyes closed. So this training with the eyes open, we want to use this meditative way of working with our mind in life, so we can bring that kind of awareness and mindfulness into life. And most of our lives are open. So I think that makes I think that's an important distinction. How does the concept of prayer compare to Buddhist practice? Well, prayer very often is aspiration and dedication. And it's, you're not praying to a God or even to Buddha to help you. You're kind of making this affirmation, using, in Buddhism, we talk about the body, speech, and mind. Those are the three ways we operate in the world, interact with the world, practice Buddhism. So a prayer, listen, the voice has created wars, right? Has ended wars, has words have immense power. So when we make a prayer, you're making this aspiration, using that energy, that vocal energy, to project it into the world. So it's really coming from you and making this. A prayer is almost like a commitment in a way. When you get married and you say "I do," you're taking a vow. Prayer is almost like that. You don't. When people get married, they don't just listen to the judge or the priest or whoever say these vows. You say the vow, because there's something very important about that speech energy. I agree that creativity and practice are separate, although I found that dedication to meditation encouraged my senses to be more open, which seems to benefit the creative side. Yeah, and that was a byproduct, but I'm saying it's not the motivating factor, at least for me. But I'm not speaking for everyone. I'm just speaking for me. I set up wallpaper on my monitor. It's a picture of what I would call my happy place. I lose my gaze into that. What do you think about that technique? I think that's fine. It's good. Do you ever forget to start the timer when you begin meditation? I usually don't use a timer. I only use a timer in class because we're pretty limited in time. Actually, I'm very limited. I'm going to have to end class in like a minute or a couple of minutes, because usually we do class on Mondays, but it's been Sundays for a number of reasons. But I'm a student in a different meditation class in about 10 minutes. So um, I have not, as a caregiver, I have not been able to physically help my friend I take care of. Do you think that putting her into meditation with her health in mind and wishing her good health while meditating is beneficial to her? Yes, I do. It's beneficial to you, you know, and if it's beneficial to you, and ultimate reality in the Buddhist perspective talks about non-duality, then there's no distinction really. Do you feel like you deal with conflict better since meditating? Feel less irritated by people? I don't know if I feel less irritated, but yeah, I do. I do feel like I deal with conflict better. You know, I do. I think before I was, meditating, but I don't separate meditation from being Buddhist and practicing Buddhism and the teachings. I didn't. Meditation came out of me getting into Buddhism, but yeah, I kind of got into a lot more conflicts because I, was more looking out for that, slights against me, and more defensive and more, felt that those things are important. And again, Buddhism does not teach be a doormat and let people just walk all over you, but it's when you make this kind of commitment, I think that it opens up more space in which to deal with these emotions. So if someone says something that makes you angry or cuts you off on the highway, because you're training in it, you may be able to open up a little space where you can take a breath rather than just lash out and want to, retaliate. That, like I said, that does not mean we don't defend ourselves or defend others. But at the same time, maybe we become less defensive. Meditation has helped me personally with my mood during intrusive thoughts and voices. I was too reactive. This has helped me to detach. In detaching, the voices have mostly quieted. I know a lot of people here have mental illness, and this isn't a substitute for professional help. I agree. But training the mind is very helpful for me personally. To those who are wondering if it could help with mental illness, maybe not always it has helped me. Thank you, Caitlin. Do you find meditating as soon as you wake up to be challenging? I tried to do it right away, but I found my mind wanders less if I do it after coffee. Is that because I'm failing to do the practice? No, it's because you're addicted to caffeine like I am probably, and I need coffee as soon as I wake up before I do anything. I always have coffee. That's the first thing I do in the morning. All right. Unfortunately, well, why don't we let's do 3 minutes, and let's not use any technique. So that you make that into what you will. I'm not going to elaborate. Okay. Start now. So no technique, but just relax and merge into that great natural peace. Okay. So saying not to do technique, but just try to merge yourself with a natural great peace. It's a little experiment, those of you who have been doing this a while now, it's almost just like a test to see if the body and mind just naturally can go to that meditative state. It's not, I'm not saying let's not do technique anymore. That's not the point. That's not what we're doing. But I think it's fun sometimes just to see, you know, because we're in the posture, we're in our place where we meditate, we are in a meditation class, just kind of committing to 3 minutes of whatever that is, merging with that natural great peace, which is really what you're doing in the technique. If there's almost a natural aspect of it happening, and it may be for a split second, it may be for the whole 3 minutes or whatever, is not the thing. It's just, getting that little flavor of how that can work is good. Let's dedicate. We'll see you next week. By this merit may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you to our generous producer, Nick Solidio. See you next week.